WFLA Now will begin momentarily. WFLA Now will begin momentarily. Breaking news on WFLA Now. Here's Biunno.
Brian Laundrie's notebook at long last revealed. And in it, his story, his words, his explanation for the death of Gabby Petito and himself. We're going to read the notebook. We're going to read your comments here live on WFLA Now. Hey there, everybody. JB here with you live on WFLA Now. A lot going on in the news world today, but we turn our attention now back to the Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie story. After attorneys for both sides met with the FBI in Tampa today, soon thereafter, and as I've been told, within 30 minutes of that meeting concluding, pictures of 8 pages of the notes that were left behind from Brian Laundrie at the Carlton Reserve, as mentioned, of course, by the FBI Tampa, has been released to the media, and of course released to the public and the world. Joining me here live on stream, 8 on your side, senior investigator Walt Buteau. Walt, great to have you back on stream. Yeah, it's great to work with you once again, and thank you for taking some of your time to join us here today with a lot going on with Roe v. Wade today. Of course, I know that folks in the Tampa Bay area very focused on Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Final tonight with the Lightning. There's just so much going on here in the Tampa Bay area today.
It's crazy time to release this.
It really is. It's been an interesting last few hours, but we turn our attention and we stay solely focused for the next hour or so on Gabby Petito and Brian Laundrie, and in particular, right here, the notebook. The 8 pages that were released. How did we get these pages? This comes from attorney Steve Bertolino, who initially released it to a media outlet, then sent it out to other media outlets as well. And as I understand it, that's the way that it was described to me. We now have it, and we're going to go through this. But before we do, I want to share what I have to say. That's going to be a little bit later on. Walt, I want to get your initial reaction here first. You covered this story extensively, as did I. A lot in here, a lot to unpack that we're about to really, get into. What's your initial reaction to this?
Well, I actually, in reading a lot of court documents over the year, this isn't a court document, but in reading documents, I have this habit of reading the first part and the very last part, and then getting the middle. In documents, it usually is a conclusion that will give you an idea of what the thing's about. But I will tell you, so I went to the last page of this, and when he writes, "I have killed myself by this creek in the hopes that animals may tear me apart, that it may make some of her family happy." And then this, which is it's almost flippant, but please pick up all of my things. Gabby hated people who litter. It's such an odd notebook, but then in the notebook, he admits that he ended her life, but he claims it started as some sort of an accident, that she fell in a creek, that he helped her up. She had a bump on her head that got bigger, and she was freezing and she was shaking violently. It was some sort of an accident. He built a fire and brought her by the fire. Again, these are Laundrie's claims on his notebook, and then he says at this point, she had a small bump on her forehead that got bigger, and then he writes that she was in extreme pain.
We're going to read all through it here in just a moment.
He says, "I ended her life." That's the admission that would make this a homicide. But the point is, do we believe the story that she fell Is he couching it? Would the FBI believe this if he was still alive? Very interesting, that part that he claims this starts as an accident, and he almost makes it sound like it was assisted homicide. He was trying to put her out of her misery.
Let's backtrack to Dr. Brent Blue, of course, the autopsy that was performed in Wyoming. And we're about to read through this, folks. If you're just joining us, you haven't missed much. It's Walt Petito, JB here with you live on WFLA. Now we're going to read through the letter, and you can hear these words for yourself. Some people have messaged me already saying it's been difficult for them to read these words. We are going to read them, and you will make the determination for yourself what to believe. People who have been so invested in this story for so long, for really the last 9 months, it'll be up to them and each one of you individually to determine if you believe what Brian Laundrie has to say in his final words in this notebook. But let's go back to Dr. Brent Blue. She died of manual strangulation. Now, the lawsuit claims that she also died of blunt force trauma, which actually does line up with some of what you're about to hear, but that the actual cause of death, according to the autopsy results for Gabby Petito, was manual strangulation. As I have noted here on multiple streams in the past, many a stream, we have talked about how manual strangulation doesn't happen by accident. It takes a long time. As grim as it is to discuss, it takes a long time to choke the life out of somebody. So this was done with intention. It was done deliberately. Manual strangulation, of course, is a crime of passion. We have noted this, of course, so many times. And we'll hear perhaps more about how it all now fits, how this final massive piece of the puzzle comes into play, and whether or not you at home believe the final words of Brian Laundrie. I'd like to thank our digital content producer, Sam Sachs. As we were preparing this live stream, he was able to transcribe this. Reading some of the, look at the first page here. This is the first page. It's like diagonally written. And so it can be really difficult to read in certain spots. There's some crossouts here. Some of the ink from the pages kind of bleeded together. It's a little difficult to read. So I'm going to read the transcription for everyone's sake. Otherwise, it might take me a bit.
Important to point out, it appears to me the first page is a letter to Gabby.
It is.
About
I
how
think
much
the
he loves
entire.
her, right?
I think most of it's a letter to Gabby.
It looks as though he starts in the second one and is talking to everybody else, but maybe not. But yeah, it's eye-opening to me. Very surprising.
So these images are going to flash on your screen. Please allow me the next several minutes to read this for our audience, especially those who are just listening. Not everybody watches our stream. So I'm going to read this out loud, and then we're going to come back afterwards, and we're going to have a discussion, and we're going to feature some of your comments here on Facebook Live and at the YouTube Live comment section as well. We'll try to get to some of the folks on Twitter using the hashtags on your screen, #HeyWalt, #HeyJB. You can start filing in those questions and comments now if you'd like. You can ask us questions about how you think this fits into how we think this fits into the puzzle, the lawsuit, how this released, why this was released, who this favors, which side in the civil lawsuit. Does it favor the Petitos and Schmitz, or does it favor the Laundries? We're going to kind of get into this now. But first, here is the final words in 8 pages in the notebook found at the Carlton Reserve, gathered by the FBI, the final words of Brian Laundrie. It reads as follows. Gabby, I wish I was right at your side. I wish I could be talking to you right now. I'd be going through every morning we made, getting even more excited for this future. But we lost our future. I can't live without you. I can't be without you. I've lost every day we could have spent together, every holiday. I'll never get to play with cats with you, never go hiking with TJ, who I will mention very briefly, Gabby Petito's brother. I loved you more than anything. I can't bear to look at our photos, to recall great times, because it is why I cannot go on. When I close my eyes, I will think of lounging on the roof of the van, falling asleep to the sight of, unintelligible, at the Crystal Geyser. I will always love you. If you were reading Gab's journal, looking at photos of our life together, flipping through old cards, you wouldn't want to live a day without her. Knowing that every day you'll wake up without her, you wouldn't want to wake up. I'm sorry to everyone this will affect. Gabby was the love of my life, but unintelligible, by many. I'm so very sorry to her family because I love them. I'd consider her younger siblings my best of friends. I am sorry to my family. This is a shock to you as well, a terrible grief. They loved her so much, if not more than me. A new daughter to my mother, an aunt to my nephews. Please do not make this harder for them. This occurred as an unexpected tragedy. Pushing back to our car, trying to cross the streams of a creek before it got too dark to see, too cold, I hear a splash and a scream. I could barely see. I couldn't find her for a moment. Shouted her name. I found her breathing heavily, gasping, and, unintelligible, was freezing cold. Also unintelligible. Something, something, the blazing hot national parks in Utah. The temperature had dropped to freezing, and she was soaking wet. I carried her as far as I could down the stream towards the car, stumbling, exhausted in shock. When my, unintelligible, and no, I couldn't safely carry her, I started a fire and spooned her as close to the heat. She was so thin, had already been freezing too long. I couldn't at the time realize that I should have started a fire first, but I wanted her out of the cold back to the car. From where I started the fire, I had no idea how far the car might be. Only knew it was across the creek. When I pulled Gabby out of the water, she couldn't tell me what hurt. She had a small bruise on her forehead that eventually got larger. Her feet hurt, her wrist hurt, but she was freezing, shaking violently. While carrying her, she continually made sounds of pain. Laying next to her, she said little, lapsing between violent shakes, gasping in pain, begging for an end to her pain. She would fall asleep, and I would shake her awake, fearing she shouldn't close her eyes if she had a concussion. She would wake in pain, start her whole painful cycle again, furious that I was the one waking her. She wouldn't let me try to cross the creek, thought like me that the fire would go out in her sleep and she'd freeze. I don't know what the extent of Gabby's injuries, only that she was in extreme pain. I ended her life. I thought it was merciful. Thought it was what she wanted. But I see now all the mistakes I made. I panicked. I was in shock. But from the moment I decided, took away her pain, I knew I couldn't go on without her. I rushed home to spend my time I had left with my family. I wanted to drive north and let James or TJ kill me. But I wouldn't want them to spend time in jail over my mistake, even though I'm sure they would have liked to. I am ending my life, not because of a fear of punishment, but rather because I can't stand to live another day without her. I've lost our whole future together, every moment we could have shared. I'm sorry for everyone's loss. Please do not make life harder for my family. They lost a son and a daughter, the most beautiful girl in the world, Gabby. I'm sorry. I have killed myself by this creek in the hopes that animals may tear me apart, that it may make some of her family happy. Please pick up all of my things. Gabby hated people who litter. Are the final words of Brian Laundrie as it's been, again, given to us. And I also, too, I want to read because, interestingly enough, when this was sent my way, this from Stephen Bertolino, the Laundrie attorney, it did include a cover letter with his header at the top of it. So I don't know if people have seen this yet, if it's been made public, but I want to read the letter that Stephen Bertolino sent, or really included as a cover letter for the release of this evidence. And it reads as follows. Regarding Brian Laundrie, today the Petito family attorney Patrick Riley and myself met with the FBI in Tampa to sort through and take possession of the personal items that belong to Gabby and Brian. This was a previously agreed upon exchange to enable both the Petitos and the Laundries to receive what belonged to their respective children. As part of this return of property in FBI custody, I was given Brian's notebook. I would like to share with the public the note that the FBI alluded to when they said on January 21st, 2022, that Brian claimed responsibility for the death of Gabby Petito. Although I have chosen to release this letter as a matter of transparency, I will not be commenting further, as there are still proceedings pending in court. These are Brian's words. And then it continues on for these 8 pages that Brian left behind. Again, the notebook that has been the object of such tremendous international fascination for months. really months, really since the FBI revealed at the creek that day that a notebook was discovered. I remember, Walt, I believe you and I were on stream together when we were surprised that the FBI, usually extremely guarded with their comments, they had said at that time, that day, at the Carlton Reserve in the press conference, that they had discovered a notebook. And then, of course, the notebook being mentioned in the FBI release at the conclusion of the investigation, and has persisted in people's minds, I think permanently, for people that have followed the case so closely. Just, it's been there, just like bothering people who wanted to know once and for all, why is Gabby dead? And there are going to be some people who listen to these words and just listen to what I had to say as far as reading Brian's final words, and who are going to believe those are the answers that I was looking for. And I can tell you right now, I'm looking at the comments that are coming in. There are people who believe that this is not the story, that this is not factually what happened. We have to take it for what it is. We have to take it for it being Brian's last words, these final 8 pages that he scribbled and left behind for the world. But we can't, no one was there. It was the two of them in Wyoming on this cross-country trip. We do not know what happened. There is some things that we can point to, such as the blunt force trauma and some other things that we can point to. However, we have to look at this for what it is. It's Brian's claims as to what happened that day in late August when he says he ended Gabby Petito's life.
You know, and I think that it's basically his side of the story, and he covers all the important points of the blunt force trauma. He would claim if he didn't kill himself and went to court, he would claim she fell in the creek. And then perhaps if he didn't kill himself, he would have said, I was putting her out of her misery, which would bring it down from a homicide, would bring it down from first-degree murder. But at the same time, just on its surface, it's a hard story to believe. You know, I think. If
this was an accident, if this had been an accident.
You don't kill yourself.
Right. And I know this is going to sound this might sound like a very primitive question given where we are with this investigation. But if something happened to Gabby, why aren't you calling 911?
Right.
If something happens to Gabby, your fiance, the woman that you're supposed to spend the rest of your life with, something happens out in the wilderness, why don't you call 911?
And a woman,
or why is the option to strangle that person to death? That's the part that, to me, that doesn't, at this stage, it just doesn't add up. If you love this person, you're meant to spend the rest of your life with this person says that they want to spend the rest of their life with you do everything that you possibly can to save that person's life. Not end it because this person was in pain. Of course they're in pain. Accidents happen in this world. And listen, it could have been, if this story is to be believed, it could have been a terrible, tragic, extremely gruesome accident. We don't know the extent of it. But if it did in fact happen that way, then aren't you doing everything in your power to get help? Aren't you doing everything in your power to save this person's life? And
remember, we know the backstory, which was the stop by the police officers in Moab, where they stopped him, and there had been an incident between the two. We know they had a sort of difficult time toward the end of the trip. So that is circumstantial evidence that I think would make this claim harder to believe. But it's here's the other question too. Bertolino releases this. And the Laundries would have had to, I think, say, yeah, that's okay. So does he somehow think this helps their civil case? Because I don't think it does. I don't think it helps the civil case at all.
I think, well, let's just, if there's one person that I want to hear from right now, perhaps more than any other, and I'm talking about people that are currently alive, I want to know if Judge Hunter W. Carroll is aware that this evidence has been released and knows the contents of this, and now really where that fits in. Judge Carroll, and let me explain for those of you who haven't been watching our coverage of the civil lawsuit, Judge Carroll is going to be releasing a decision within the next 2 weeks on whether to grant the Laundrie's motion to dismiss the civil lawsuit that has been presented by Joe Petito, Gabby's dad, Nicole Schmidt, Gabby's mom, against the Laundries, claiming intentional infliction of emotional distress. Judge Carroll basically has that lawsuit's future in his hands. He is going to determine for himself whether or not this should proceed to trial. There's, of course, a lot of a lot of energy behind seeing it go to trial so that more of this story can come to light. However, as Matthew Luca, the attorney for the Laundries, argued in Florida court the other day, he said this invites an avalanche of litigation because you're basically challenging the Laundries' decision to remain silent. That's pretty much in essence. Now, Pat Riley would counter, and I'm getting into the ping pong, but he would counter by saying it's not just their silence, it's their conduct, it's their actions that they took after Brian returned home, after Brian allegedly informed the Laundries of what happened. However, Walt, this is a great point you bring up. Where does this fit in now legally? Who is this advantageous for? And perhaps we can get into this question. You don't think it seems to help anybody. You've covered a lot of cases, so I want to know what you have to say.
I'm not an attorney, and I've got to believe that Bertolino and the attorneys in the civil case must think this somehow is advantageous to them. I don't see.
Otherwise, why would you release it? They have no.
You don't have to. You do not have to release this. They had no reason to release it.
And let me just pass along a little bit of insight from that's my opinion here, and this is from having conversations with Mr. Bertolino over the last 8-9 months, and just trying to work with him as reporters and lawyers do, right? He does not release this on his own. He is releasing this with the blessing of Chris
Absolutely.
and Roberta Laundrie. So Chris and Roberta Laundrie, this is them speaking for the first time. This is them saying to the world, we want you to know our son's story, what happened in his words. Because if Chris and Roberta tell Steve, we don't want this released, by all means, I am of the opinion, this is my opinion now, that Bertolino doesn't just go rogue and release it on its own.
No way.
He's releasing it with Chris and Roberta.
So
this is from Chris and Roberta. This is from Brian Laundrie's parents wanting the world to know that they believe that this is what happened.
And keep in mind, I don't believe that this would be a public record if I reached out to the FBI, because it was never used in a trial. We never got to a trial. The FBI does not have to release this to me. I don't believe. We could request it. So the point is, this could have been held secret forever. The family could have decided that. And then one more point. What about weren't there crumbled up papers near it, and there's another
handwritten half
notebook.
Note.
There's the handwritten half
note.
Where's that? Is the first page? Is the first page the handwritten half note? That was doesn't look crumbled though.
When we were getting some of the documents, folks, about what was gathered at the Carlton Reserve, there was a notebook and a handwritten half note. And that was just an odd way of,
right.
It's an odd descriptive term, right? A handwritten half note.
A handwritten half note.
I believe that's what, I don't think it was half note handwritten.
No.
Or half, right. Yes,
so the point is, where's that? And it wasn't there's a second notebook. There was a second notebook.
As I understand it,
there were multiple backpacks.
But as I understand it, and this is what I have gathered, that this is what has been referred to as from the FBI, that there are pictures of Brian Laundrie with carrying notebooks, and I believe that it was not strange for Brian and Gabby to have books.
And by the way, this is what the FBI is referring to, because clearly it says in 4 words, "I ended her life."
Yeah, you're not. Yeah, and somebody just commented, and we're gonna believe me, folks. We know we have thousands, I'm not kidding, thousands of #KJB, #KWalt comments in the queue. We are about to start pouring into that. Just allow Walt and I a little bit more chance for some discourse here. There's people are asking in the comment section, is this it? Like is this? And to our understanding, this is it in its totality. As far as what Brian left behind as his message to Gabby, after, of course, she was deceased, his message to family members, his message to really the world, that as we understand it, this is it. And now it's really up to the public at large to determine if they believe Brian Laundrie's final words. Walt, you've covered murder investigations, murder trials. I've done the same. We know from hearing enough psychoanalysis of people that commit terrible crimes that it is only natural as far as, again, psychoanalyzing people that have done terrible things, that they form a coping mechanism, that their brain will then try to distort reality. I'm not saying that that's what happened in this case, but it is so common that people that are responsible for murders, whether intentional or accidental, sometimes they will distort reality or distort their memory of what occurred in their head as a coping mechanism. I'm not saying that that's what happened in this case. I'm just saying, is this Brian's, again, could this again be Brian's recollection of what occurred and his version of events for it to, in his words, hopefully, to be easy on his family, on family members and friends and loved ones. He does, mention a couple of members of the Petito family in this note as well. Absent from this note is Nicole Schmidt, Gabby's mom. He mentions TJ, Gabby's brother. He mentions James, who, as I understand it, that of course, I know him as Jim Schmidt. That would be Gabby's, Gabby's stepdad. But I don't. There was no mention of Gabby's mom, Nicole Schmidt, in this.
The other thing you can talk about what you just mentioned, and it's his way of coping. I think from the other side, it's his way of sort of lessening the blame on him, to imply, or not even imply. He killed her. He ended her life to be merciful. If that doesn't anger anyone who knew and loved Gabby Petito, they're already angry. But for that claim that this was a mercy killing, really? It's hard to believe, and it sounds like someone to me who's guilty of something and trying to make it seem less than it is. That's what it sounds like. And by the way, I was about to. What's the weather like at night in that part of the country?
Brilliant.
On the 30th?
No, it's a brilliant question.
Is it freezing? Is it really freezing? It might be. I don't know. I'll look it up right now. August 30th, around August 28th, August 27th. It's late August, right? And where are we? We're in.
Yeah, this is good stuff. I didn't think of that.
But in all, it is what we waited for, and in some ways,
I'm looking.
The interesting thing, and in the news business, and I'm not sure that Bertolino knows this or did this, but on purpose. But in the news world, we talk about the Friday news dump, where late in the afternoon, federal agencies, state agencies will release things that we've been waiting for, because the coverage of it could be impacted because it's released late in the afternoon. And in this case, it is released on a day where there's a huge story out of Washington with the Roe v. Wade situation, and then there's other news happening here as well. So this gets far less coverage today than it would have yesterday or Monday.
I am trying to find weather records from Grand Teton.
So average temps.
Well, and now, look. That's just a reference point, folks. So I'm not. It's just a general idea as to what the weather would have been like there.
We're talking Wyoming, correct?
Mm-hmm.
This would be okay.
I'm trying to get something somewhat near.
Let me just go with. I've got something here. I got August. In August, the low is 52, the average low. Now, of course, are they in a particular area that's higher? Are they in a higher altitude area that could impact it? The average is 52. The high is 80.
I'll have to look up.
The low is 52.
I was trying to pin. There's weather records, of course, for every pretty much location where they track weather. So there's obviously going to be. We'll have to circle back to that when we have time, or maybe again, our terrific audience perhaps can help us look up.
Let me plug a friend of mine who's now a retired weatherman.
We do have an entire weather department about 40 feet that way, but we're currently
a friend
in our
of mine
newscasts.
Made a website called weathercollector.com, and it allows you to check the weather on any day in history for any part of the country. This is a great time to use it. Let me see if it works.
Well, but hold on though. I'm going to throw a little bit of a wrench in that logic for a second, and please allow me to do so as we're doing our due diligence here. He says that he heard a scream and a splash. So it might not have been her freezing might not have been directly related to how cold it was in August.
So you're
in
soaking
Wyoming.
wet. You're thin.
Soaking wet.
You're soaking wet. You're thin. You have no insulation, and it's a 50-degree night. Are you freezing? You could be. I guess you could be freezing.
At a high enough altitude with enough of a breeze, you're
Maybe.
feeling pretty cold if you are in the waters of Wyoming and you're trying. How long are you in those waters, too?
That's true.
How long are you exposed
Yeah.
to? So, again, these are some of the questions now, folks. The contents of this letter are going to be analyzed and micro-analyzed.
Yes, sir.
I know I've had conversations with some of the folks on Reddit, some of the folks on Discord who some of them told me they couldn't sleep when this story when Gabby was missing and when the manhunt for Brian Laundrie was going on. So I know those folks. I know some of them just by communicating with them directly. And believe me, I know that they are going to be microanalyzing every word, every letter
There will
of
be
this
theories.
letter.
There will be theories. There will be lots of theories.
I'm sure that there already are.
Yeah.
Let's now, while you, I'm going to just ask one more time that you give us your take on really we talked for so long about whether or not this would ever come to light. Right. I wrote in my article on WFLA.com yesterday that really the future of the notebook remained unknown, whether or not it would be released to the public. And really, it's released for one reason, because Chris and Roberta Laundrie wanted it released, right? So that's the reason that we have it. But as I start to, guys, I'm going to take my eyes, I'm going to go this way, and I'm going to start to grab as many #HeyJB, #HeyWalt comments as possible starting right now, so you can start following them in. In the meantime, are you surprised? You and I were talking Roe v. Wade.
100%
and then
surprised.
I'm just going to put you solo on camera. Just explain to me.
Well, you didn't. So it has to be somewhat strategic. There's no obligation to release this notebook. It was not going to be made public. They've been quiet all this time. They're being sued now civilly. There has to be a strategy for why you would release this, because you did not have to release it. I doubt anybody's banging on their door trying to get it. We wouldn't have even known that the FBI had released the notebook to the Petito family, except for the news release by Mr. Bertolino. You did not have to release it. Why did you release it? What does it potentially do for that civil case? Because you could have clearly waited for the judge's decision on the civil case, released it after. You could have released it with more panache, if you will, to a national news organization that would do some sort of exclusive story. You could have released it to me, and we would have done a story on it. But you released it this way on a Friday late afternoon, and it's interesting because it's an odd document. It's an odd confession that he is claiming that he, quote, ended her life to be merciful because she was cold and had a bump on her head. The bump on her head perhaps explains the blunt force trauma that the ME discovered. So are you explaining that? You're sort of giving yourself you're explaining what your side of this. How did it happen? I didn't kill her. You're basically saying I didn't kill her because I was angry at her. I didn't kill her because I wanted to kill her. I killed her because she was suffering. So you're sort of making yourself into this odd hero, this regretful hero, and it's not necessarily a great look, but what does it do strategically for the Petitos in that civil lawsuit? That, I think, is a key question. Mr. Bertolino's not going to answer that. He's not representing them in the civil case, but still, it's definitely different than what I expected, more details than I expected. And again, I hate to harp on that, the last part of it. And you wonder how long after he wrote those last words did he pull the trigger. But the last words of cleaning up the area because Gabby hated people who litter. Again, it just sounds flip to me. It's not. I don't know. It's an odd thing to end an 8-page note with, I think.
Yeah. I mean, it's just you're talking about. Listen, regardless of what you think of Brian Laundrie, everybody, regardless of how you feel about him, this is somebody who is under tremendous emotional distress at this moment in time when he is writing this. He is basically writing his final words to the world before he takes the firearm that he has brought with him into the Carlton Reserve, turn it on himself, and take his own life. Yeah. So you have to, and you cannot read this without having some kind of an idea as to, or at least thinking or trying to imagine what was going on from an emotional standpoint, knowing that this was his fight. And let's also point out something as well here, Walt. Do we know that this was written at the Reserve?
No, we don't know where it was written.
We really don't.
It's also not as, it must have been in the dry bag because it's more legible than I thought it would be.
Remember how often, or how long you and I were on stream talking about whether the quality of the notebook and if it was wet or not. But
by the way, real quick, a Twitter follower sent me the weather for August in 2021 in Grand Teton.
Let's hear it.
And so that part of Laundrie's story might make sense. What is the dates have escaped me. I had them etched in my brain.
There's several different dates.
But toward the end of the month,
it's really the last week of August.
Toward the end of the month, the lows were, let's start on the 25th. Okay. 43, 38, cold. 39, really 33, cold. 31, 36, 37, 38, 34, 36, 29, getting us to September 4th. So that claim,
for someone who's wet, that's extremely cold.
That would be extremely cold and debilitating. I'm not saying that makes this more believable, but at least that part, who knows? Maybe that part is true, that the blunt force trauma did occur in a creek. Very possible the van was parked near a creek. But thanks for the Twitter follower on that one.
One year, I remember participating in a polar plunge. I forget the town, but it was a charity thing, and I jumped into freezing cold water and came out into freezing cold air. And I don't know if I've ever really experienced misery like that before. And
you know what? It would be worse if you had clothes on.
And it was about that temperature, if I remember correctly,
if you had clothes on, a shirt, it's probably even worse.
Way
right?
worse. Yeah. Way worse. So you're trying to, your immediate, like your instincts kick in, and your immediate instinct is to get all the wet clothes off of you and to cover yourself with anything as warm as possible. But, okay, back to some of the comments that we have coming in. Jessica Laurie, we're going to start with YouTube, bounce to Facebook. We're going to bounce back and forth between Facebook and YouTube. This is what our YouTube comments look like. #KJB, just saying 911. Now, the next question is, what kind of cell service was there? And
it might not be great. He doesn't mention that in here, though.
And also, too, but
if your girlfriend, the love of your life, has a bump on her head and you're freezing, and you have access to a vehicle, you're not putting her in the vehicle and rushing her and hurting the heat?
I think he alludes to in the note that he couldn't get her across the creek.
Oh, does he say that?
Let me go back. Just excuse us, everybody, while we go through this.
Let's see. Knowing every day you'll wait. Where is it? Please do not.
Oh, here we go. She would fall asleep, and I would shake her awake, fearing she shouldn't close her eyes if she had a concussion. She would wake in pain, start her whole painful cycle again, furious that I was the one waking her. She wouldn't let me try to cross the creek. Thought like me that the fire would go out in her sleep and she'd freeze. So the claim is, with Brian Laundrie's story, is that he makes a fire near a creek to keep her warm enough to keep her alive. That was what he was doing to rescue her. He even says that he spooned her to keep her warm, to keep her breathing, to keep her alive. And that he claims that she didn't want him to go across the creek, that she didn't want him to, in essence, go for help because she was fearful that the fire would go out and that she would be left to freeze to death alone. That is, in essence, really the story that Brian Laundrie provides.
Solid alibi. Solid claim. If you're his defense attorney, it's a good claim because Gabby's not going to dispute it. She's not here to dispute it.
Maybe, and you know, Stephen Bertolino, is he looking at this and saying, look, I can point to how my former client, my deceased client, tried to save her life, tried to stay with her as long as possible,
loved her so much that he was going to be merciful because she was suffering. That is a, you know, I've covered enough murder trials that when it's even, I've covered murder trials where you enter a murder trial and you think this is open and shut. I remember one in particular, a death penalty case in Texas, where after the guy was convicted, the attorney, he tried to fire his attorney because he said his attorney was drunk during the proceedings. And I had covered them, but I'll tell you, even that drunk attorney was able to make me feel, not a juror, but a reporter, a little bit of sympathy for that particular guy. And that's what defense attorneys do.
Yep.
And so maybe that is the key to why this was released, because does it somehow make sense? Does it somehow make a jury in a civil case go, well, wait a minute, not so fast? I don't think it does, but that could be a thought.
Home Office says, #KJB, did they find evidence of a fire near her body? This is something I was wondering as well.
Great question.
Nothing that we have ever heard indicated that a fire was made, and even if they did, how do you point to that fire being the fire that was, in fact, claimed to have been made by Brian Laundrie? Danielle says, okay, going back to cell service now. Big part of this now is going to be cell service. And also, too, did he have a phone? Was the phone dead? Let's remember something about this story. These are two young, in their early 20s, documenting their trip, taking pictures and videos everywhere. They had their phones everywhere that they went along this cross-country road trip. So you could look at this two ways. They always had their phone. Their phone was always at their hip or in their bag or in their pocket. Okay, but you could also point to, is there any chance that Brian Laundrie's phone ran out of battery because all they were doing were taking pictures and videos out in the wilderness? That also, too, is a wrinkle within this. If
it's your profession to be a vlogger, I would think you would have all sorts of ways to charge phones.
Backup batteries.
And if your hobby is to camp, I would think you should at least be conscious of the fact you may need that phone. But then, would have the cell service been okay? I don't know.
Danielle, #KJB. Brian Enton, he had great cell service. They were less than a mile from the other campers and less than a mile from the van. She was found next to a built fire pit and a tent impression. So now Brian Laundrie's, are we going from the notebook to the phone? Is that what is going to... is that what's going to happen here as far as trying to determine why he didn't call 911? Let me explain something, okay? If I have a loved one that is in a life-threatening situation, I'm doing everything that I can to save that person's life, okay? I'm sacrificing my own life. I mean, that's just me. I can't speak for everybody else. I'm doing everything that I can for my loved one to survive. I mean, whatever it takes. Now, look, you could look at Brian's words and Brian saying that, you know, Gabby didn't want him to leave. You could absolutely point to that and being fearful that the fire, you know, that campfire was all that was keeping her alive and keeping her from shivering to death.
Yeah, well, and
but 911 is really going to be now the big question as to why 911 emergency services wasn't called. Was it a question of cell service? Was it a question of battery power, or is the story just not true?
Well, we may never know. There's nobody to ask that question. Obviously, if this goes to trial, you would think the Petitos might pay an expert witness to go to that area, and theoretically, you know, an expert witness is, some people say if you go through enough expert witnesses, one of them will tell you what you need for your case. And in this case, you get an expert out there who will tell you there's no cell service out there. He couldn't call 911.
Evie on Twitter, #AJB, #AWalt. If it was that cold, Gabby was wet, and Brian tried to carry her, he would have also gotten wet, and they both could have begun easily suffering from hypothermia. I guess. Why
isn't he suffering from hypothermia?
If there was a splash and Gabby fell in and hurt her head, I'm trying to picture it, and that's the only thing that we can do is try to picture this as this story happens. Brian says they'd heard a splash and a scream. So if Gabby was in distress falling into the water, doesn't Isn't the natural instinct of any person to jump into that water to save that person? Now, look, you could say it was a shallow creek. He extended an arm out, a hand out to pull her up, or to grab her by her torso or by her shoulders or her arms and lift her out of the water, and he didn't get wet. But Evie's question.
This story eliminates any claim of premeditation, is what he does with this story. He's saying this happened in the spur of the moment. It was an accident. It starts as an accident, and then it ends with a bad choice on his part. He's basically claiming some sort of criminally negligent homicide or even a manslaughter here. I don't know. I'm obviously not a lawyer, but he still did. Allegedly, he strangled her, right? Or she died from manual strangulation. He doesn't mention that, but the point is, he's making it sound like I didn't plan this. I did it to help her. And that's the only defense you could possibly use, right? Not necessarily this way. You have to come up with a way that you didn't do what people thought you did, and maybe that's what he was thinking here, and maybe that's why his attorney or the Petito's attorneys released this.
Brian Laundrie for so long.
Not the Petito's family.
No, I understand what you're saying. Brian Laundrie for so long has been the villain. The villain in this story, and so many people around the world have only ever thought of him as a villain because Gabby was as I think her family would say, this shining light, somebody who had this big smile, who was infectious with her energy and her charisma, and she was just so much fun to be around, according to, of course, her family and loved ones. And it was just so, I think, easy for people to associate Brian Laundrie as the villain in this story. But now this story, and I'm not saying that it's true, folks. I'm not saying that there is fact in this. That's not what I'm saying. But now it's starting to emerge, and I'm sure in the minds of some out there, as to whether or not this was a massive, tragic accident that took a dramatically difficult turn where Brian Laundrie was left with few options. Now, look,
it's not. Look,
here's the thing, though. Even as I try to bring that into this conversation, Walt, I could never. I think most people bring themselves to end that person's life.
I can't imagine ever wanting to do that, but especially in this case where it's possible. Now, she survives the night. You keep that fire roaring hot. You help her out. You keep her comfortable, and that's what you do.
Some might say, look, that might have been an extremely painful way. Some people might wonder or say aloud, look, Gabby might have been past the point of no return, and that Brian was doing the merciful thing. And I'm sure that is a potential legal argument in this case. I just think it's going to be very difficult for people to wrap their brain around these two being out in the wilderness together, these two supposed to spend the rest of their lives together, Brian professing, even afterwards, in this note, professing this true love for Gabby, and his course of action is to strangle her to death. I just think that there are going to be people that no matter which way you shape it, no matter which way you phrase it in a court of law or in a context like this in a live stream, that they are never going to buy it. And that's just from my coverage of this story.
But you only need one juror to buy it.
You
only need one juror to buy it a little bit, and you get a hand in picking that jury. So I don't know. Is this somehow does this somehow get that story out there to? Is that the reason you put it out there? Do you put it out there?
Absolutely.
Do you put it out there to theoretically poison the jury pool, so that now more people see it, and now you can't get a jury?
Let's go to some Facebook comments, because this now goes right into some of the comments that we've been getting in on Facebook. And let's start here with the one comment that we got in from Cliff McAfee Jr. Cliff saying, #AJB, this will impact jury selection with this release. We were talking about this earlier, finding a jury for this civil lawsuit should it proceed to trial. And, of course, this now getting this out there, it establishes an alternate story than what people in their minds have believed for so long, that Brian was just this savage, person who killed his fiance and retreated, to Tampa Bay and did so and took the in the words of some of our commenters from previous streams, the cowardly way out by taking his own life. So there's now this version of events, and really, it's the only version of events that we have because it comes from one of the two people that were there. It's just up to whether or not people at home, people around the world, believe it to be true.
And the other side would say Gabby never got a chance to write a note. Gabby never got to write a goodbye note, right? But by the way, in a civil case in Florida, I believe you need 6 jurors. So that makes it a little more difficult maybe to find that juror that will side with you. But at the same time, yeah, there's no doubt this could be something we hear in that civil case if it moves forward.
Joanne Banks, #HJB, please answer my question before I go into work. And my question is, how do we know he wrote that? Does that handwriting match any other handwriting that he had? Anne Marie, #HJB, have they had his handwriting analyzed? Pretty Raina, #HJB, has the handwriting matched back to something old of Brian's? There's a tremendous amount of doubt in our comment section that this is in fact Brian Laundrie's handwriting. And
where's that doubt coming from, though? That's just suspicion that, I don't know, it's the FBI. I would hope they would not pin a case on someone.
The FBI has indicated that the notebook revealed Laundrie killed himself. Right. They're not, this is the FBI.
That's right.
They are going to do handwriting analysis. I've had conversations with former FBI agent, one of our go-to experts, Jennifer Coffendoffer, who was in our story yesterday. And Jennifer told me, look, this is going to the lab. This is being analyzed every way you can possibly analyze it. They're going to analyze it from a microscopic perspective, getting it under a microscope, to analyzing the style of handwriting. But
the short answer to both those comments and all the comments is no, we don't know that. We don't know that yet. The FBI doesn't confirm or deny anything, and at this point, it's a closed case for them. But we don't really have an answer to that question. But it's a good question.
We've got, of course, a sizable audience here on YouTube Live and Facebook Live. Hello there to you, JB. Walt Petito here with you live on WFLA Now, trying to bring as much perspective, analysis, and just just thoughts in general about the release of the 8-page notebook being released. And it's just it's been a very long day with live streaming with Roe v. Wade earlier. Walt, I'm very cognizant of your time. You just tell me.
I'm good.
How much,
I'm good for a little while. I'm
good.
Working on something for 6, but I'm pretty much caught up, so I'm good.
C. Aaron Peach, #HJB. I believe it's Brian's. Okay.
So do I.
Let's go through some more YouTube comments. Kristen Gibbons, #HJB and #HeyWalt. Prior to their trip, do we have any reason to believe he lies or makes stories up? I can't really.
There was the friend of Gabby's who talked to a paper. Was it out of Northport or something? She went to one of the papers over on that side of the Bay Area, and she had said Gabby was fearful of Brian, that Brian was possessive, and that's the most we really ever got out of that's the best insight I think we have into their relationship, but I don't recall if there was anything about Brian making stories up. But in this case, I don't know. We'll never know.
In the various conversations that I've had as well, I have also heard that Brian was, somebody who was someone who really clung to Gabby. And possessive is a word. I think that was tossed around at one point as well. But as far as do we have any reason to believe that he lies or makes up stories, I can't say. You good, Walt?
Actually, I've got to run.
Okay. Walt Petito, everybody with us on WFLA Now. Might be getting some breaking news in our newsroom that is related to one of the many stories that Walt covers on a regular basis. I'll do my best here to answer as many questions and comments as possible as we continue to go through. We're now focusing on YouTube Live. Let's go through these here, folks. And I'm just trying to read these because some of these comments are nowhere even close to being rooted in reality. I mean, are so far-fetched that They're almost comments that, comments that are just almost trolling us at this point. But bringing in Walt back. So you are back. You good?
I am back.
Okay. Let's get to some other comments and questions. Natalia Glenn, #KJB, would they release it without the handwriting analysis? Absolutely, they would. But the FBI...
Keep in mind, the they is not the FBI.
Well, the FBI... Well, hold on. So the FBI released it to Stephen Bertolino today.
So when she says they, the FBI is not released... I'm not sure. Do you know what I mean? Like they released it to the attorneys. Did they release to? So we don't know if the attorneys got a handwriting analysis. Keep in mind, the they is the attorneys, not the FBI. The FBI released it to the attorneys, but there was no obligation for the attorneys and the family to release it to us.
Absolutely. So if the they is the FBI, if that's what Natalia is saying here, the FBI is just, they're looking at all of this as, it wasn't just the notebook that was returned today. There were other items that were returned today to the Petito and Schmidt family, and also the Laundrie family. Again, this goes back to my reporting from yesterday. Pat Riley, Stephen Bertolino, the attorneys for each side, met today at FBI Tampa to gather those items. And there were multiple items. Some of those items, they wanted to get their hands on and look at it, FBI Tampa, before they determined, which family should get that item. And so we have this notebook, and that notebook I think was going to be released no matter what, and it was up to Stephen Bertolino and Chris and Roberta Laundrie as to whether or not to release it to the public. But bottom line is, to Natalia's comment, the FBI would not have said that the Laundrie notebook was what contained the written statements where he claimed responsibility for Petito's death, had they not done a thorough analysis to ensure that it was, in fact, the words of Brian Laundrie. Right. There's just no way. They are far too thorough and far too precise of an organization and of an investigative agency to say that and release that in their report to the public definitively, right, without knowing that it was, in fact, Brian Laundrie's last words.
And it's interesting also that the FBI did not release any other part of this story. All they said was he took responsibility for the murder. They did not release the claim that she fell in the creek. They had no obligation to do that. But is there something to read into that the FBI only released that small part, basically ends up being just 4 words: I ended her life. That's the confession. That's it. All they told us was that, and they did not release the claim that he was trying to be merciful. They did not release the claim that she fell in a creek and hurt her head or anything like that. What does that tell us? Does that tell us anything?
What? I'm sorry. I was just reading some comments.
The fact that the FBI only said he confessed to the crime, whatever they said, they didn't release any other detail of this, like he claimed this, he claimed that. He claimed it was a mercy killing. They didn't release any of that.
Right.
All they released was that one little detail.
It was one
amounts
sentence.
To 4 words in this document. And I think that's telling. I think that's telling.
Here's another thing. There's so much now. This opens up so much. And another thing that this opens up is this reopens up examination of the autopsy. Because if she really was suffering so much from the cold and from being wet and from it being 39, high 30s, low 40s, and if she was at risk of hypothermia, then is it possible, given the quality of the remains that were discovered at Grand Teton, at where they found the body, should the autopsy analysis have given us some inclination that in Gabby Petito's final moments, she was freezing to death? Is there anything that in the autopsy now, according to Dr. Brent Blue, is there anything in the autopsy that would squash this story? Is there anything that would make that, oh no, that they have evidence from the autopsy based on the remains that they examined that she was in good health before she died? That's also too a massive part of this.
Well, I think if you could get an expert, an ME or an expert on on autopsies, would they be able to tell you her body was found? Again, the timeline used to be so fresh in my mind.
I'll bring it up.
But was it a matter of weeks where she was found? Was it the 19th of September? That rings a bell. If I nailed that, let me know. But if it's a matter of weeks, if a body has been there for a matter of weeks, and perhaps, out in the elements, would someone be able to tell that there was hypothermia at the time of death? I don't know the answer to that. I don't know if an ME can determine that or not. I think in a TV show, they would be able to determine whether it was hypothermia, but I don't know if in real life you would be able to see any signs of hypothermia on the skin or on the body in the remains of Gabby Petito. But it is a good question. It would theoretically back up some of Brian's story.
Or disprove it, depending on what they have.
Right.
What was the date you said?
I don't know. I guessed September 19th.
Very good. Everybody yeah. Walt is, yeah, Walt has not covered this story in a long time. Walt is, of course.
That's just imprinted on my brain. But so it's about 20 days, because I think we had a window of 2 or 3 days around the end of the month. So it's 20 days out in the elements. Is an autopsy capable of picking up signs of hypothermia out there? I don't know the answer to that, but it's a good question.
I'm getting some text messages here, Walt. Can you just take over here for just a second?
If you're just joining us, it's an 8-page note. Starts with an apparent what I would categorize as a letter of love, if not a love letter, starting with Gabby. The first line, I wish I was right at your side. I wish I could be talking to you right now. And it goes on to explain how great she was, and that basically that he loved her. And then it goes into sort of 7 more pages where it describes her in great detail, how great she was, and then tells a story of Gabby tripping or falling into a creek, bumping her head, being freezing cold in weather that we think could have been in the low to mid 30s at a nighttime because it was dark. We know they could not get across the creek. He claims they could not get across the creek to get to the vehicle to drive her for help. So he stays on one side of the creek, and he actually claims Gabby wanted to stay on that side of the creek. And then he claims she was in great pain. She had a wound on her head. It got worse. She was in great pain, and he said, quote, I ended her life, and that he thought he was being merciful but regretted it afterwards. That's his story, and that's what we get out of this 8-page letter that ends with him basically saying that he killed himself by the creek in Florida so that animals would ravage his body to make the Petito family somehow feel better about it. I have killed myself by this creek in the hope that animals may tear me apart, that it may make some of her family happy. And so, that's the beginning and the end in the middle of this 8-page letter that we've been waiting for nearly a year, right?
You bring up a good point, something that we talked about yesterday on stream, or it might have been 2 days ago. The days are starting to blur together a little bit, folks, so apologies. But, one thing that we talked about, and I'm going to ask you this question. I want to ask you this question. I'm going to ask this to everybody else. And give me in the comment section here, folks. Give me either a yes or a no. Let's not even get into explanations yet. Just give me a yes or no to this question. Do you think, based on Brian Laundrie's final words, do you think that he was remorseful for what happened?
You're asking me?
I'm asking you, and I'm asking everybody. You can put in either a Y or an N in the comment section, or look, you can still. For everybody who, of course, thinks of Brian Laundrie the way that they do, you can still feel that way and still think that there's remorse in this.
I think.
So I just want to hear why or yes. Is there remorse in this in the public's opinion? Walt, let's start with you.
So, if what he's saying is true, and that he made the very, 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 very poor decision to end her life the way he did, claiming it was mercy.
All right, this is a poll now. We're making a YouTube poll.
If it's true, I believe he could have remorse, and he does claim to have great remorse in these 8 pages. However, if he has made this story up to cover his tracks, to make it sound like it wasn't as bad as it seems, to make it sound like it wasn't cold-blooded murder. It was a mercy killing. I was trying to help her. If that's a lie, then I don't believe he had any remorse, because that is the type of a fib, a lie, that someone who is narcissistic writes. And I don't think people who are narcissistic have remorse ever. And so that, I think, in my opinion, it just depends on whether or not this is true, that I believe whether or not he had remorse. He does claim to have great remorse. I don't know which one I believe. I'm going to keep my journalism hat on and just say, again, if it's true, I think he could have had remorse. If he made it up, I don't believe he had remorse, if that makes sense.
Danielle, hashtag HJB, no, he left her there. I'm seeing way more no's, but considering the...
You're not going to get many yeses that he had remorse, I don't think.
It's just that, you know, you can, and I'm just talking, and I have to say this, it's my job to say this. I'm talking in generalities. People who have in the past committed acts of evil, they can do so, commit that act of evil, and then be remorseful after the fact. It doesn't change the fact that they did something evil. It doesn't change the fact that they need to be held responsible for it, or that they need to be punished for it, or that, you know, the hammer needs to come down, so on and so forth. It's just that the remorse is something that in certain stories, of course, can matter to people. Because if you're not remorseful, you commit this act of evil, then in the optics of it, you're just the incarnation of evil, because you don't feel responsible, or you don't feel any regrets for what you did. But if you express remorse, then look, there are people in this world that believe that if you do something terrible and you express remorse for it, at least you feel bad for it, because it gives you a sense of humanity. It makes you human to feel bad for something terrible that you did. So for Brian Laundrie, does that level of remorse exist to where people feel it? Like, feel it? Do they read these words and say, wow, this is terrible, this is evil, this person can never be forgiven for what they did, but at least they're remorseful? Do people think that way, or no?
The beginning of your point, he's defending in a weird, he's defending
his actions. He is.
So is that admitting you did it? You're saying I did it, but I did it because I was helping her. I'm merciful. I mean, it's not a good look, I don't think. I just don't think it's a good look. Because that part's hard to believe.
There's different sections of this now, if we're really analyzing this from the outside looking in, not word for word, but kind of taking a step back. Okay, there's sections of this, and I'm going to read like what these sections are. The first section is Brian talking about his relationship with Gabby. It then gets into the story of what happened, and then it starts to get into a little bit as to him describing the ramifications of his actions and the fallout of what has transpired. Those are the sections. Now, okay, so for a second, let's say that you just eliminated the first two sections. You eliminate the letter to Gabby. You eliminate the letter to
everyone else.
Like if it was just remorse, would people feel differently about it? I think the fact,
yes.
Right?
Yes.
The answer is yes.
1,000,000%.
And the fact that we have this story is his rationale, as you noted in your words, him defending exactly what transpired. And whether it's true or not, this is where the court of public opinion comes into play. This also comes into the poll that we just typed out in a hurry on YouTube. And we asked, do you believe that Brian Laundrie was remorseful for Gabby Petito's death? And 78% say no, and 22% say yes.
Wow. I think I'm surprised by the 22% to some degree, just because of the way we've seen this story develop. But, you know, the worst people in the world have remorse.
Sunshine. Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Sunshine one, hashtag AJB, lots of other options would have kept her alive if he hadn't killed her on purpose, is the comment from I'm sorry, continue.
Yeah, no, I was just getting, go ahead. No, I finished my thought.
Okay. Miss Daydreams, #KJB, #KWalt. He's only remorseful towards himself.
That's a solid point. I mean, he's seen, there is a lot of
name dropping in this, though.
There's a bit of poor me in here, isn't there? Isn't there a bit
Is that
of,
your, yeah?
Isn't there just a bit of, even the last line, I don't know. I want animals to tear me apart to make some of the family happy. I don't know. The thing, there's a tone in here of, I loved her very much. I loved her. It's a love letter at the beginning. As you said, these sections, there's a short period about how great she is, and then the middle of it discusses this alibi, if you will, of what happened, this explanation of what happened. There's a little bit of, I didn't mean to do it. I didn't mean to do this. I felt I had to do it. It's an odd confession.
We're going to get back to your comments and questions in just a moment. I think it's our responsibility and it's our duty to talk about the fallout of this. And I mean that from an emotional standpoint, okay? Because my reporting yesterday was, I talked to Steve Bertolino yesterday, and he told me that Chris and Roberta Laundrie, they were given the opportunity to read this at one point in time, and they couldn't bring themselves to do it. They said that it was way too upsetting. And listen, Bertolino told me yesterday that up until this point, up until yesterday, they hadn't read the letter. So Chris and Roberta Laundrie, now, so let me explain this today. So Steve Bertolino gets off of a plane from at some point this week. Of course, he's getting off of a plane from New York. He comes down here to Tampa, and he meets with FBI Tampa. He retrieves this notebook to return that and other belongings of Brian down to Northport to Chris and Roberta. And we what's so interesting about this, and we're pointing this out for the first time, is that we don't know, and it's very likely that the answer to this is yes. We don't know if we're reading this before Brian's parents do. If you believe Stephen Bertolino, if you believe him, he told me that Chris and Roberta Laundrie did not read this when they were given the opportunity to at one stage in time after their remains were found at the Carlton Reserve, because it was just too upsetting. So there's a chance that Chris and Roberta don't know the contents of this. There is that chance, and they haven't read it for themselves. The public and the media know it first. But then again, we talked earlier about how Chris and Roberta likely would not have released this unless they gave their blessing to their attorney to do so.
It would probably be a conversation like, we think you should release this. We think it's okay to release it.
Bottom line, the reason I bring this up is that because if you are with the Petito family, and I'm not just talking about Joe, and I'm not talking just about Tara, I'm talking about the entire family now, who have been, of course, through their nightmare over these last 9 months. If you're with the Petito family, the Schmidt family, or the Laundrie family, this is a day that there's tremendous emotional fallout from this, because the world for months has wanted to know what Brian's reason was for taking Gabby's life. And we now have this reason, and it's about coping with that. It's about figuring out whether to believe it, and it's about figuring out how to deal with it mentally. We talk so much with live streams about mental health, and I can't help but think about how this impacts people mentally, given everything that has transpired with this story. And I'm just encouraging folks. There's some people that were so emotionally invested in the story. I would like to do my due diligence as a human being to remind everybody just to take care of themselves. There were some people that couldn't sleep at night with this story when Gabby was missing, and this coming out today. And I just want to encourage everybody out there, whether you're connected to one of these families or not, whether you're an attorney for one of these families or not, or whether you're just somebody who had this spiritual connection to this story, to Gabby, at some point over the course of these last 9 months, just take care of yourself and be well, because reading these words can be difficult for some people, especially when you're you've been wondering for so long what these words might actually add up to.
You know, I think if I was, as a parent, I don't think if this was my son I could read, or I would want to read it. If you're Brian Laundrie's parents, I think you're going to be in a nightmare of memories the rest of your lives. Same with the Petitos. I don't know that either one would want to read this. I don't know why you would. I think you just want this to somehow be over. And I think having talked to plenty of victims over the years, they always tell you it's never over. It's just a matter of finding a way to cope with it. I'm not sure reading the 8 pages would be something that would help you cope with it. I think it would be heartbreaking to see your son's handwriting and his claims of that he loved this girl, that he felt he needed to end her life because she was in such pain. I don't think I'd want to read that if I was the parents either.
Hold on, folks. I got something for you. About to get a phone call here, as I understand it. Stephen Bertolino has made it clear that he is not going to be commenting in the aftermath of this, but that doesn't mean that the other side doesn't want to have their story heard. And so what I'd like to do, I'm going to hold up my phone here to the microphone. Joining us now on WFLA Now is attorney Pat Riley. Pat, you're live across all platforms, just so you're aware.
All right. Hi, JB.
Hi there, Pat. Pat, of course, who folks saw in court during the pretrial hearing in Sarasota County Court a couple of days ago. Pat, you contacted me, and I'll give you just the kind of floor and to say what you'd like to say in the aftermath of this.
Yeah, as I had said to you earlier, I was kind of shocked that this was released within about a half an hour after we left the FBI office up in Tampa. And I find it ironic that Mr. Bertolino says he wants, in full transparency, was releasing this. Well, someone should ask him why he doesn't release the entire notebook, but more importantly, ask him why he doesn't release Roberta Laundrie's letter to her son.
A letter to her son. So Roberta authored a letter to her son. Can you explain more of what you're referencing here? Because this is news to us.
Well, the letter has, Mr. Bertolino has the letter. I don't have a copy of the letter, but the letter appears to be written to Brian after Gabby was killed, and there's some pretty extreme things that she said in there that, without having the letter here to quote it, I don't want to say, but I will simply tell you that there's some pretty extreme things that were contained within that letter.
When was this letter authored by Roberta Laundrie, and where is the whereabouts of it now? What can you tell us about it from those questions?
The letter is undated, so it's uncertain when it was written, but certainly based upon what's contained within the letter, it would appear as though the letter were written after Gabby was killed and before Brian took his life. And the letter is currently in the possession of Mr. Bertolino.
Was that one of the items?
I will tell you, by the way, that on the envelope that contained the letter, the words "burn after you read this" were written.
And who authored those words? I'm just trying to be as precise as I can.
Roberta Laundrie.
And again, that was written and that was delivered to whom?
Brian.
And was this one of the items that was retrieved today from the FBI, Tampa? And
yes.
And is this, you have alluded to me in multiple phone calls, Pat, about evidence that you have to back up the allegations that you have made in this civil lawsuit. Is this one of the pieces of evidence that you've been alluding to for so long?
Absolutely.
And where does the letter fit in to as far as this story that we are now learning of, with Brian's words, his final words as revealed in the notebook? Where does the letter fit in relation to the story in the notebook?
I don't know that the letter necessarily fits in with the story of what's in the notebook. I'm simply responding to Mr. Bertolino suggesting that he's trying to be transparent, but he's picking and choosing what he wants to be transparent about. So
this is now you believe, of course, that this was released by Stephen, or I don't want to put words in your mouth. Do you believe that this was released by Stephen Bertolino as a chess move in this civil lawsuit?
I candidly don't know why it was released by Mr. Bertolino. That was a question that I've been pondering since it was released. I don't know if it was released in an effort to try to find some kind of sympathy for Brian because of what's contained in there. I don't see that. If he's trying to garner sympathy, I don't think that's going to work because it's an admission that he killed her. And even more so, if this was the woman he loved and there's supposed to be some sympathy, he left her body there and told no one where she was, or at least not my clients where she was.
One more time, the cover of the envelope, according to you, did you see this envelope today at FBI Tampa?
I did.
And again, it said what?
Words to the word, and this may not be the exact words, but it was burn after you read this.
And it was a letter that Roberta was giving to Brian.
Yes.
And so burn after you read this. Why would in your words, why would a mother deliver that letter to her son? This is a family that was on vacation together after Brian returned home. Can you provide some clarity as to why Roberta would say that to her son and do so in the form of a letter? I mean, they're communicating, I'm sure. I mean, Brian returned home to Northport. He's returning back and living under the same roof as his mother and father. So then why would this letter exist?
I don't know if that letter was written before or after he came back to Northport, but there was the most I want to say is that there was an offer to assist Brian with some things in that letter.
An offer to assist Brian with some things in that letter. You have alluded to, Pat, and it's written in black and white in the lawsuit. You have made the claim that Chris and Roberta Laundrie attempted to help their son Brian flee the country. Is that a part of this letter, this note? No, that's not a part of the note. Not to my recollection, no. Because we're now getting some different, you know, I'm just trying to figure out exactly where this factors in and where this fits in, because we have the allegation in the civil lawsuit that they were trying to help him get out of the country, but now this burn envelope letter is part of the equation. So I'm just trying to figure out exactly where this all fits in chronologically and how it fits into the relationship that existed between Brian and his mother.
I guess the most I can say, because again, it was undated, and so I'm guessing when the letter was actually written. Again, I'm fairly certain it was between the time period of Gabby's passing and then Brian committing suicide. So I don't know the exact date it was written. I don't know when it was delivered, but it was found on Brian, or actually it was found in the van when he came back. So I'm led to believe that he had that, he received that before he came back to Northport, but I don't know that for certain.
Oh, so the letter was found in the van?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, I'm sorry, no. The letter was found in the Laundrie's home, but it had been taken out of the van.
Gotcha. Okay, so now according to Pat Riley, of course, who we're on the phone with here on WFLA now, there's this the presence of this letter that exists. Pat, did you read the letter today while you were with FBI Tampa?
I did.
What can you tell us about it other than what it said on the cover of the envelope?
I can tell you that the letter contained an offer from Roberta Laundrie to assist Brian Laundrie.
And you won't tell us what?
I prefer not to say exactly what it said until I have the letter in front of me, or you have the letter in front of you and you can see exactly what it says. To
assist Brian in something, but again, this was found and was taken from the van, but found in the Laundrie home, so it's likely dated at some point before Brian returned home to Northport, or at least in that time window. So you're alluding to, and you're not telling us what it is, but you are alluding to Brian being offered help by his mother Roberta to do something that we're not being told what that is at this time.
Correct.
Okay. Your reaction to this story that Brian left behind. I'm sure by now, of course, you have read the 8 pages of the notebook. I'm sure
Yes.
by now that you and your clients have had an opportunity to at least process it. What do you make of Brian Laundrie's story that it was that he heard a splash, a scream, that she was cold, and that he was told by her not to leave her side and to stay by the fire? And this story that has been presented by Brian and his final words to the world, what do you and your clients make of this story?
That's a version. There's another version. I don't have a copy of the other version yet, but I've been advised there's another version that he authored that we will be getting, hopefully through the Freedom of Information request, that does not entirely match up this particular version.
So you're saying that there is a second note of confession?
Yes.
And is it a written note of confession, or is it another different form of a confession? I ask this because I know that these two were so tech savvy, and somebody who really lived a lot of their life, at least they were very prevalent on social media. So is this a written note, or is this something else?
It's on a device.
It's a device. Is it a
Yes.
Is it a typed out note?
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
So you're saying that there is a second note that has been typed out on a device that you do not have possession of and was not part of the gathering of evidence today by FBI Tampa?
Correct.
And I want to just confirm, are you saying that the story that is told in this digital note doesn't match what is laid out in this written note?
It's similar, but it's not the same. But neither, this note makes no sense as to what happened.
In what way? Please elaborate.
My understanding is that the area where Gabby's body was found was not very far away from where Brian Laundrie could have gone and sought help for her if he wanted to.
Can you provide any explanation? And this would be one of the first questions that I would ask for Mr. Bertolino, who did have conversations with Brian before he went into the Carlton Reserve and claimed his own life. Is there any reason why, that to your understanding with this story and this version of events, why Brian didn't call 911 or specifically seek out help in another form before carrying out, in his words, or in really laying it out for our audience here based on the story that he presented, what was a mercy killing?
Well, I can't answer that. I wasn't there. I can only say that I don't believe his story.
Okay. Do your clients believe the story?
Oh, no.
Where does this fit in now legally, Pat? Going forward, you and I had conversations earlier this week about how this was just coincidence that the pretrial hearing, the hearing on the motion to dismiss, was on Wednesday, and that just by pure coincidence that today, Friday, the 24th, June 24, 2022, that today was the day that you and Bertolino were at FBI Tampa to pick up and receive this evidence. Where does this now fit into the legal picture as far as the civil lawsuit? There are so many people around the world who have been clamoring justice for Gabby, and so many people around the world that have just been clamoring for the truth overall. So where does this now, we're getting a lot of new information today. We're hearing the new story that has been presented by Brian Laundrie in his final words in the notebook. You're now talking about a letter that exists between Roberta Laundrie to her son with some aggressive language on the envelope of that letter, and then also as well now a digital note that you says partially contradicts the written note that we have presented in front of us today. So where does this all fit into the puzzle that is this civil lawsuit?
I think it's too early to tell. I want to wait until through the discovery process we have all of the information, and we have the Freedom of Information. We get our documents through the Freedom of Information request, and then I'll be in a better position to analyze where it all fits in.
I have submitted a Freedom of Information Act request as well. Are we expecting to hear back on that FOIA? Now that the FBI has released that evidence, are we in an accelerated timeline to get perhaps some of those FOIA requests responded to?
I can't answer that. I can't speak for the FBI.
Okay. Pat, with Mr. Bertolino defending, of course, his clients, and of course you advocating for your clients, a big question, of course, that has come into this is, and we were talking about this earlier, is remorse. and whether or not Brian expressed remorse, and whether or not you believe that Chris and Roberta Laundrie have remorse. Stephen Bertolino on News Nation, speaking to Brian Enton the other night, Wednesday night, said that he and his clients have no regrets with how they handled the situation. So remorse is something that I have asked questions about. I've asked our audience here, and 76% of our audience has said that they don't believe that Brian was remorseful as far as his last words here. Do you believe that there is remorse in the words of Brian Laundrie, and do you believe that there is remorse from Chris and Roberta Laundrie as well?
I can't speak about Chris and Roberta Laundrie because, no, I'll certainly say I've not seen any remorse on their part. As far as Brian is concerned, in reviewing this notebook, I'm not seeing remorse in it. I'm seeing a lot of self-pity, but I'm not seeing remorse.
What do you think is the future of this story? We went into this live stream, and some people commenting along saying this is over, it's time to move on, other news in the world that we need to be focusing on. And then, of course, we now get the letter providing this explanation, and this opening up new questions, this opening up now even more questions, because you're telling us that this is only a small part of the story. You're saying that there is more to be told. Where does this go from here, Pat, before we let you go?
Wow. I guess until we get Judge Carroll's rulings, I don't know where this goes. But if we get the ruling that we're hoping for, I think there's going to be a lot of information that we get to discover that has not been made public to this point because the Laundries have remained quiet. So I'm hoping that as this moves forward, we'll get more information from them.
And what is the end goal? You're filing a civil lawsuit. There's the wrongful death lawsuit. Of course, there's monetary amounts listed in these documents. What are your clients? What do Nicole Schmidt, Gabby's mom, Joe Petito, Gabby's father, what do your clients want as a result of all of this now coming out 6 months after the FBI concluded their investigation?
Well, they want everyone. Well, what they want at the end of all of this is justice. They want Brian Laundrie's estate held responsible for what Brian did, and they want a jury to tell the Laundries that what they did, with the knowledge that they had, having had the relationship that they had with the Petito family, that what they did was wrong, and they have to atone for it.
Pat Riley, calling in to WFLA Now to share some more news on a day that has been filled with news regarding the Gabby Petito, Brian Laundrie story. Pat, thanks for taking some of your time to join us today. And I offer, if they are watching, I offer Stephen Bertolino, even though he had said that he is not going to be commenting on this further, I offer him the same opportunity. I am as fair as they come. Stephen Bertolino, if you'd like to call, you have my phone number, and I offer you the opportunity to respond. Pat Riley, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, JP.
All righty. Folks, this, of course, is now a new development in this story. And so we are going to take a step back here for just a second and see if we can have a conversation in our newsroom here. We are not going anywhere. We'll be back within the next 2 minutes here on WFLA Now.
WFLA Now will begin momentarily. WFLA Now will begin momentarily. Breaking news on WFLA Now. Here's J.B. Biunno.
The attorney for Joe Petito and Nicole Schmidt saying that this is not the complete story, that there is more evidence to be heard in the form of a second confession note written by Brian Laundrie that is digital, and also as well a letter written from Roberta Laundrie to her son Brian that was retrieved with words on the envelope reading, "Burn after you read this." JB here with you live, folks, on WFLA Now. Just a moment here to reset because this was, of course, an unexpected development here live on WFLA Now. We're getting news now that there is more to the story than what we have been sharing with you over the last couple of hours. This 8-page note that was left behind by Brian Laundrie, which in his words illustrates what happened the night that he claimed the life of Gabby Petito. But is there more to it? Pat Riley, the attorney for Gabby Petito's parents, that being Joe Petito and Nicole Schmidt, coming on with us a short time ago. You just heard it here live. You can scrub back in this video and perhaps you'll be able to find it. Telling us that there are two pieces of evidence that the world needs to know about. Two pieces of evidence that tell more about this story than what was previously known and what is beyond the 8 pages that we have here from Brian Laundrie. Most notably, perhaps, is the existence of a second note from Brian Laundrie, where, according to Riley, he leaves behind an account of what has transpired and that it partially contradicts, it partially doesn't add up with the 8 pages that we have here. And this is, of course, why does this matter? It matters for a million reasons, but from a legal perspective, of course, this matters for the future of the civil lawsuit that exists between the Petito and Schmidt family, as well as against the Laundrie family in this case. So we have been hearing now for weeks, I have been told for weeks, about the existence of evidence that that Nicole Schmidt and Joe Petito want to see come to light. And clearly, this 8-page note left behind by Brian Laundrie isn't the evidence that they have been referencing. It was let out, of course, this was released by attorney Stephen Bertolino, and it was done so to provide a little bit of context as to, in Bertolino's, I'm sure, in his purview, as to why Gabby is dead and what actually happened on this cross-country road trip. But from the other side of the aisle, quite literally, we have now the other side saying, and this being Pat Riley and Nicole Schmidt and Joe Petito saying, no, this is not the entirety of the story. You don't have all of it. There is a second note that is digital that we believe, according to Riley, is written statements, probably in all likelihood that is on a phone, that we don't have access to because it is not physical evidence, it is digital evidence. So the status of that digital evidence would then be released by a Freedom of Information Act request. We don't have that at this time. What we do have is the words of Pat Riley, who, if you believe him, he has the claims. He says that there is this second note that has more to it and that, at least in some respects, does contradict in some way what we have here as far as the 8-page note that we've been talking about over these last couple of hours, as well as now this mysterious letter from Roberta that says burn after you reading this on the envelope, according to Riley. He says that he read himself at FBI Tampa today. He would not reveal the contents of that letter. I invite attorney Stephen Bertolino on to come talk with me about it as well, to either confirm or deny the existence of this evidence and whether or not it was in fact authored by Roberta Laundrie, whether or not his clients are aware of this digital note that has been written allegedly by Brian Laundrie, and whether or not they believe, of course, that it tells the story accurately, or if this is the accurate story. If there are contradictions in the two notes, then my question for you, Stephen Bertolino, would be, which is the real note, which is the real story? Are they both true in different ways, or are there obvious contradictions that poke holes in the story that we have been presented with here today in Brian Laundrie's notebook? These are all massive questions, questions that I invite Bertolino on to come answer. He has said he is not commenting any further today. I'm keeping an eye on my cell phone here because if that changes, if we get new information where Stephen Bertolino wants to release a text or a statement. In fact, I'm going to text Mr. Bertolino right now. I'll read it. Steve, do you have any comment on Pat Riley's allegations of a second note left behind by Brian Laundrie and a note written by Roberta to Brian? We'll see where that goes. If I get a response, we'll let you know. And Steve, just like Pat did, you're invited to call in if you'd like and speak on these new allegations that have been presented. I think it's about time that we feature some of your comments and your questions here, folks. We're going to do so. Our audience is bigger right now on YouTube, so we're going to go to our YouTube comments and start there. Chris Johnson. Hashtag HeyJB, burn after you read this or something similar. So she's instructing her son to destroy evidence that screams innocent, remorse, lack of knowledge of the crime, cover up. We don't know. We don't know. I'm getting some other, I'm sorry, guys. Phone's starting to light up a little bit here. Okay, getting to some other comments and questions. Okay, so Debbie Village, hashtag HeyJB. What do we know about when Brian first got back to his parents' house? Did his parents cooperate or not? So here's the thing. As we have been told by Mr. Bertolino in the past, there is of course, this belief that there has been this relationship that developed over the course of the investigation where Chris and Roberta Laundrie were cooperating with law enforcement, both Northport Police and the FBI. But Northport Police spokesperson Josh Taylor, who has been on WFLA now, who called in one night in September, he would later release a statement saying that that the Laundries did not cooperate fully early on in their investigation. When Northport Police was in charge, that there was not a fully in sync level of cooperation between Northport Police and between the Laundries. That's in essence what his statement said. And it was after Northport Police admitted to the world that they had mistaken Roberta for Brian when they had surveillance on the house, if folks remember the story. Connor Moss, hashtag HeyJB, burn after you read this doesn't sound like something that could be innocent, but could just be my opinion. Okay, burn after you read this means discard of this, get rid of this. Do not let this exist beyond the initial reading of that note. That's what it means to me. Burn after you read this. So what that note actually contains, which again, Pat Riley coming on here saying that that note exists but wouldn't reveal the contents of that note. But the timeline of that is interesting because he's saying that it was originally found in the van, and then it was transported to the house, taken into the house. So burn after you read what that actually means. And really, Pat Riley's saying the note isn't dated, which is, of course, makes it really difficult to pinpoint chronologically when it was written, when it was received, how it was transferred, what the contents of this letter now is something that is going to determine perhaps the future of this civil lawsuit, but it's coming out really before Judge Carroll's hearing. After Judge Carroll's hearing, So Judge Carroll hears these arguments the other day about whether the civil lawsuit's going to proceed, and he's going to release his ruling in the next couple of weeks. This is all coming out now in the media, this is all coming out on WFLA Now after that hearing has taken place. And as I understand it, it was because the FBI Tampa coincidentally released all of this evidence back to each family today, again, in Tampa, Florida. I like the comment of Mystery Maven, our moderator here on YouTube Live. Please take a break if you need to, folks. It has been a very, very trying day for a lot of folks. Some people have celebrated the Roe v. Wade decision. Others have been extraordinarily upset by it. And so with this news and everything that's transpiring, please take care of yourself. I said it earlier, and I will say it again. And thank you to our moderators for spreading that word as well. Adam, #HJB, if Roberta did write a letter with burn after reading, would that be definitive evidence to incriminate the Laundries? If it was definitive evidence, it would have led to charges. That letter doesn't contain anything that would lead directly to charges being filed, criminal charges being filed against Chris and Roberta Laundrie. Otherwise, the FBI would have proceeded with charges against the Laundries. So this isn't enough, but it's something. It's something that perhaps will be relevant in civil court, but wouldn't matter in a criminal proceeding, according to the fact that, again, the FBI didn't file charges. The FBI had this letter. It's FBI evidence that is being dispersed back to the original parties. And so it wasn't enough for criminal charges, but is it relevant in a civil court, civil trial? Perhaps we'll find out if it does proceed to civil trial. That's in the hands of Judge Carroll. I can't answer this question, but Tyler asks, #HeyJB, what are the rules if the Laundries had made a deal with the FBI? Would they be obligated to tell the public? His parents found this bag in 3 minutes. FBI couldn't find anything on their own. We do have to remind folks that the Carlton Reserve was heavily submerged in a lot of water, feet of water, as a result of heavy rains that came in after that area, or came in after Brian Laundrie claimed his own life. So I understand that there has and there continues to be this question asked as to how Chris Laundrie was able to find the bag so relatively quickly while the FBI couldn't, when we were showing you videos, countless videos of people combing through every inch of the Carlton Reserve. But let's not forget, the waters had to recede for things to surface. And so there were people asking, okay, well, what about the underwater crews, dive crews? Why wasn't there, why didn't the FBI find it? And I think I'm just going to pass this along. You got to see the Carlton Reserve with your own eyes before you can really understand how large and vast that it really is. And it is, and in the reporting I've done on this story, finding Brian Laundrie's remains very much like a needle in a haystack. And that's what I'll say about that. So I got to ask you now. So Bluest Protocol, #KJB, how did they test the authenticity of this letter? Now I got to ask you what letter you're talking about. We have now 2 letters. So if you're talking about the letter that is the notebook, I would imagine, of course, that it went through the FBI labs and they did extensive work to ensure that this was the word of Brian Laundrie. As far as this letter that was written allegedly by Roberta Laundrie to her son Brian that said "burn after you read this," I can't speak to whether or not the FBI has never made mention of this Roberta letter. Never been mentioned. It was just made known to the world moments ago by Pat Riley, the attorney representing Joe Petito and Nicole Schmidt. So I don't know if the FBI, you can imagine that the FBI went through the same exact process with that letter as they would the letter that was found at the Carlton Reserve, provided that, these letters were found and likely in different condition. But still, the process and really protocol remains the same for the FBI as they examine evidence. They're going to, of course, use the resources at their disposal to determine whether or not this is, real evidence or if this has been designed for some alternative purpose, but I can't say. Again, Bluest Protocol, I don't know what letter you're talking about now. For the first time, we're talking about the existence of multiple letters. #HeyJB from Kristen Gibbons. #HeyJB. I wonder how they know for sure that Brian wrote the second letter, the electronic one. That doesn't match up with the notebook. Well, if it was found on Brian's phone, and also, too, well, did Brian sign it? You can put a little digital signature, just like an email, your name underneath something that you write. But also, as well, this is an excellent question, because what Kristen is really pointing to is the fact that you can examine someone's handwriting to determine whether or not it was written by the person that you believe it was written by. However, digital can be written by anybody. Okay, you find it on someone's phone. Could somebody else have written it? Maybe we are now beginning to gain some understanding as to the difficulties and the challenges presented to the FBI in this case. Nothing that we have learned about the FBI's investigation ever led us to believe that this was like a slam dunk, open and shut kind of case. It was always presented with several challenges, and perhaps we're now learning some more of what those challenges are. No, I want to make this clear that, there's already some confusion coming in. Dog Walker joining us here, #HeyJB. If the second letter is electronic, how is there an envelope? No. Let's go over this one more time. There's 3 things I want everybody to focus on, okay? Number 1 is the 8-page letter, the notebook confession left behind by Brian Laundrie. That is his words, according to the FBI, his words of what happened to his fiancée, Gabby Petito, claiming responsibility for her death. The second is a second confession note that is digital, that was allegedly written by Brian Laundrie on an electronic device and is not with us. We don't have that. Neither parties have this, as we understand it, because it's electronic evidence and it has to be FOIA'd by the federal government. The third piece is now this letter from Roberta that likely predates Brian's death, Gabby's death, or excuse me, I'll just say Brian's death. And we don't know the contents of that letter other than it's saying burn after you read this on the envelope. So there's no envelope on the digital evidence. Hopefully, is everybody following me here? Niece, #HeyJB. Sounds like a handwritten note from Roberta and probably a text. Was it a text? Or was it a note left in a phone? Is it a text that the FBI gathered over the course of their investigation? Because, look, if it's not in the cloud, you need the physical device to access it. So was it a text? Pat Riley couldn't really say as to whether, he couldn't reveal too many details on the phone call. I tried, and I don't know if everybody caught it. I was trying to press him for as much information as I could. I'm doing my job as a reporter to ask the questions that you want answered. However, we just don't know whether or not it was a text message. Is it possible? Absolutely. Liberty Bella, hashtag HJB, can you please confirm the supposed letter written to his parents people are sharing online is fake or real? You mean the one that's on the right side of the screen? Because if you're talking about that, Liberty, that is real. I can confirm the authenticity of that based on, of course, it being released by Stephen Bertolino less than 30 minutes after he left FBI Tampa today. It came from him, and the FBI has confirmed that there was a notebook that had Brian's written statements in it where he claimed responsibility for Gabby's death. Vanny, hashtag KJB, Roberta's letter did say burn it, and it seemed like she was going to help him in some way. Virginia Norell, hashtag KJB, can y'all please read the note that Brian left that you guys are showing? I read it earlier, Virginia, and I don't want to read it again because we've had developments that have occurred since then. I encourage you. It's fully transcribed on WFLA.com, the WFLA app. You can click on the link in the description on this video. It'll take you over there, and you can read word for word what Brian wrote. I don't want to read it again because it took me about, I think, 7 or 8 minutes to, maybe it was a little bit less, like 6 or 7 minutes to read it beforehand, and I want to stay focused on the new developments at hand, if I may. Oh, man, this is a great question. Hashtag AJB, can Bertolino be forced to expose the contents of Roberta's letter to Brian? This is an excellent question. We'll have to pose this one to attorneys. Jolene, hashtag AJB, why didn't he burn the letter then? Why keep it if he knew he will die? Why put your parents in such trouble if you already confessed? Questions. Yeah, there's a lot of very, very good, pertinent questions that now come out after this. Dan and Marcy Nyhouse, hashtag KJB, how far was Gabby's body from the last place the van was spotted? I don't have that in front of me. But, the geography now of all of this is going to come back into play. And we're going to have to revisit this because Brian is claiming that he couldn't cross this creek to get to the van and get to help, and that he didn't want to leave Gabby's side. And Pat was there on here just a moment ago saying that part of the story and based on what they have gathered with this doesn't add up. So Liberty's saying, hashtag AJB, no, there is a letter to his parents from Brian. It shows up as a suicide note before this notebook was released. Different letter. No. I know what you're talking about now. Don't make me go on my TikTok rant again. I'm joining TikTok, by the way, because I have been alarmed by how much, not only there's been misinformation, but no one is going to end the misinformation that exists on TikTok. But I went on a rant about TikTok the other day. Some of you might remember it. And I did because some people on TikTok were using my name, using my face, and using screenshots of my work, but then taking my reporting and morphing it into something else and saying that I reported something that I didn't. And that angered me. And I had to speak out against it. It's my responsibility to. It's the right thing to do. And I told people, look, if you're on TikTok, I don't care what platform you're on. If you're going to screenshot my content, if you're going to screenshot my reporting, that I am a massive advocate for spreading good information online. But don't screenshot me and then twist and morph what I say into something that I didn't, because then that's an attack on the hard work that I do to present people with good, honest, credible, fact-driven information. So look, TikTok is a circus. It's a realm of chaos, because anybody with a phone can say anything at any time. And you can say that about any social media platform. But TikTok has a propensity to attract the crazy. And not only attract the crazy, but consume the crazy. So I'm starting TikTok. I'm getting on TikTok. I've made a single video, but I made my account at WFLA-JB to start getting good information, credible information on that platform. I can no longer just sit around and watch people spread lies, spread conspiracies that have been otherwise disproven. I just can't take it. It's something that really, by now you've probably seen the look in my face. It really matters a lot to me, because us reporters, the journalists in this industry that are so committed to bringing you fact, when it's just so heinously morphed into something laughable, and then you think it's laughable, but then people perceive it as reality and perceive it as truth, it just makes you go crazy. And so I'm joining TikTok. I haven't made a video yet, but I am on TikTok at WFLA-JB, and I look forward to putting good content so that I can sleep a little bit better at night, knowing that I did my part to make sure that that is a platform where at least that there is some reliable information. And I do know that there are some responsible TikTokers out there, but there are so many others out there that do the wrong thing, and it's just wrong. It's just wrong, and we need to, there's no policing for it. There's nobody calling it out. It's just people that are gullible, that are falling for it, sharing it, thinking that it's real. It's happened on other platforms. I had to call out somebody on Facebook a couple months ago for sharing something that was so erroneous, but it got, it accessed millions of people. Bottom line is that TikTok has a problem, and I'm just gonna try my very best to be a reliable source of information on that platform. As far as Liberty's comment, there were people photoshopped images of the Laundrie notebook months ago and tried to spread it online. And yeah, it made it on the TikTok, and people were like, posting it on there. Like, oh, Laundrie notebook released. And then, be careful, folks, with TikTok, okay? And Instagram, because a lot of the stuff that gets posted on TikTok gets cross-posted to Instagram and then over to Facebook as well. Just please be responsible consumers, be responsible people on social media, and don't fall for stuff. Think for a second about the information that you're reading and consuming and where it's coming from, okay? There's the hardworking people in the media industry that present you with, especially as local news journalists that are so dedicated to presenting you with the reality that we have in this world, as twisted as it might be sometimes. And so just please verify and ask yourself, where am I getting this information from, and should I believe it or not? Okay? My TikTok rant, and I'm sticking to it. Ryan Frazier says, #KJB, most people take TikTok with a pinch of salt. LOL, it's for entertainment purposes only. Really, I would say, generally speaking, that's what I thought. Ryan, I thought the same thing. But then when you really look at what some of the people say on TikTok and some of the comments that come in afterwards, and then the amount of shares. Let me ask you this question, Ryan. I don't mean this in an attacking way. I mean this as an honest question. If it's for entertainment purposes and people share something, then why don't they realize that what they are doing is dangerous, because they know that they're sharing false information, that they're sharing misinformation? The amount of shares and the amount of comments that believed it to be real is alarming on that platform. So I could rant about TikTok all day, you guys, but I'm trying to, I'm going to try to get on there and do my part and try to create content on there about Gabby Petito, about Brian Laundrie, and other stories that I cover. I don't just cover this story, I cover other stories. So I'm going to try to always be real with you guys, man. That's what I do. I try to be real and try to have honest conversations with you and explain the news that we cover and be rooted in reality. So Just going to try to, you can follow me at WFLAJB on TikTok. I don't have a single video yet. I don't know when I will, but I promise you that every video that is there is going to be something that you can believe in, okay? Yeah, Liberty, I'm sure you weren't expecting that rant, but those images, those photoshopped fake images that came out months ago were just people looking for clicks and perhaps even looking for a laugh to go alongside it, okay? Verify the information that you guys consume online. I beg of you. Folks, so much has transpired. We've been on this live stream now for how many hours? 2 hours. So I got to get going. I would love to spend more time with you, but there's a lot of work that we now have to do in light of these new developments. Again, if you're just joining us, Pat Riley calling into WFLA Now. That's the attorney for Joe Petito and Nicole Schmidt, and dropping two major new pieces of information. Allegations now. His claims that there are two other pieces of evidence that people need to know about. One being a second note, a digital note, okay, that at least partially contradicts and doesn't add up with what we now have in front of us as far as the 8-page confession by Brian Laundrie. And then also to this letter from Roberta that had the envelope on it that said, burn after reading this, or something to that effect. So there's a lot of work that we now have to do. There's a lot of fallout from this. And also to everything still hinges back on Judge Carroll's decision. But in my conversations, perhaps this is worth noting for our audience here, okay? If this lawsuit doesn't survive dismissal attempts, in my conversations with Pat Riley, it's not going to stay hidden forever. That's my understanding, is that information that the Petitos and Schmidts are so desperate for the world to learn the truth. They're sitting on it, and they want you everywhere around the world to learn it as well. As I'm sure the Laundries have wanted their side of the story to be heard, each side wants their story to be heard. But I know, because, listen, I haven't been able to have conversations with Chris and Roberta Laundrie. I invite them to do so. I would like to have conversations with them, whether it be on camera, off camera, a phone call, a text message. I'm as open as they come and as fair as a reporter as they come. And I've said it on every stream, or almost every stream, that Chris and Roberta Laundrie have the same opportunity to speak as anybody else in this story that we have covered, okay? And so as far as the future of this, they just want their sides to be heard, okay? And Joe Petito and Nicole Schmidt have been sitting on this evidence, as we understand it from Pat Riley, their attorney, sitting on this evidence that they want the world to know so desperately, and they are confident that it will come out in some way, shape, or form, okay, in the future. And as of course, as far as me being the reporter, one of the many reporters in this story, what is my commitment to you? I don't lean on either side. I'm not here to advocate for one side or the other. I just made it very clear that Stephen Bertolino has the same opportunity to come on here as do Chris and Roberta Laundrie, as Nicole and Joe and Rick and Jim and Tara and Pat Riley. They all, look, if you want to come on here and talk to me and have a conversation about this story that has fascinated so many people around the world and really grab the attention of so many people around the world, they are all invited to do so. They have the same invitation to do so. I am not on anyone's, I don't lean any which way. The team that I am on the team of finding fact, okay? And finding out the truth of a story and bringing you the truth of a story as we learn it and explaining the process of how we learn the truth about a particular story. And that's what we do here on WFLA Now, featuring your comments, taking your questions, talking to you about the complexities of the stories that we cover. I'm going to hop off and go right to Instagram. I can't leave my Instagram audience hanging. I'm going to go on my WFLA JB Instagram account and go live there after I just get a glass of water here. and talk with my Instagram audience over there. I will be making TikTok content at some point. I can't say when. A lot going on behind the scenes here at WFLA. But I look forward to continuing this conversation and continue reporting on this story and others, all the stories that we cover here on WFLA Now. Okay, one more time, our poll results. We asked you, do you believe Brian Laundrie was remorseful for Gabby Petito's death? We received 5,500 votes, 25%, a quarter, say yes, 75% say no, he wasn't remorseful for Gabby Petito's death. Thanks so much for joining us. You can go now and read new information, these new details. You want to read the article, we have it for you. It's on WFLA.com, the WFLA app. You can click on the link in the description of this video. That will take you to the full transcription and the story that we have on our website about Brian Laundrie's notebook confession. But if you want more coverage, including on the Roberta letter and now the second digital confession note, it's all on WFLA.com, the WFLA app. I'll see you on Instagram in about 10 minutes. To our audience across all platforms, thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you next time on WFLA Now.